The blade came at my throat, and I dropped low, feeling the wind of it pass over my head close enough to lift my hair. My legs burned. My arms burned. Every part of me screamed to stop moving, and if I stopped moving, I was finished. My name is Daniel Ashford, and I was fighting for my life in front of 30,000 aliens who wanted to see me lose. The creature across from me was called Draka Ven, 7 feet of hard shell and coiled muscle, bred for this arena since the day he hatched. He did not tire the way I tired. He did not feel fear the way I felt fear. All he had to do was land one solid hit, and my part in this tournament would be over, and probably my life along with it. I ducked under his next swing and drove my shoulder into his side, using his own momentum against him the way I had learned to do with bigger men back home in training camps that never prepared me for anything like this. He staggered. Not far, just far enough. I brought the flat of my blade hard against the back of his knee joint, the one soft place in all that armor, and he dropped to one side with a sound like metal grinding on stone. The crowd went silent. Then it exploded into noise, a storm of screeches and stamping feet that I did not understand and did not have time to think about, because Draka Ven was already pushing himself back up, furious now, and a furious opponent is a dangerous opponent. I did not wait for him to stand all the way. I stepped in and pressed my blade against the base of his neck, right where the translator collar around his throat marked the one place every fighter in this tournament had agreed, by ancient law, meant the match was over. Not a killing blow, just contact, just enough. He froze. The horns on the sides of his head lowered in what I had learned, over 3 brutal weeks of this tournament, was the signal of surrender. The Grand Marshal of the Vashtar Dominion, a towering official named Yeth Korun, rose from his high seat above the arena floor and raised one clawed hand. The noise of the crowd dropped away like a tide pulling back from the shore. "The Terran stands victorious," he announced, his voice carried across the arena by hidden speakers. "Daniel Ashford of Earth has won the Ascension Games." I stood there breathing hard, blade still raised, and I understood for the first time that everything after this moment was going to be harder than everything before it. Winning the fight had been the easy part. What came next was politics, and politics does not care how fast your hands are. They led me up a long ramp of dark stone to a platform above the arena floor, where 9 Vashtar women stood in a line, each one wearing the colors of a different noble house. This was the tradition of the Ascension Games, the part nobody back on Earth had properly explained to me before I shipped out. The champion of the tournament was given the right to choose an alliance with one of the 9 houses, sealed through marriage to a daughter of that house. It was not romance, it was policy, wearing the shape of a wedding, and every officer above my rank had spent the last 3 days briefing me on which house controlled which trade routes, which house had the biggest fleet, which house we could not afford to insult. They had circled one name for me in red ink, Vekun Thasar, eldest daughter of the most powerful house in the Dominion, standing first in the line with her chin high and her eyes sharp as knives. Choosing her meant fleets, meant favor, meant a treaty that would make my superiors very happy. But my eyes kept drifting past her, down the line, to the very end, where a much smaller young woman stood alone, a full pace of empty stage between her and the sister beside her, as if nobody wanted to be seen standing too close. Her name, I would learn in a moment, was Alira Vosk, and she was the reason everything that came after happened the way it did. I asked Grand Marshal Korun, quietly, why she stood apart from the others. He hesitated before answering, choosing his words with visible care. "House Vosk carries no honor in war," he said. "Years ago, during her trial of passage, Alira refused to strike down her opponent. She walked from the sand instead of finishing the match. Since that day, no house has sought alliance with hers. She is considered unfit for a champion's choice." I looked at Alira again. She was staring at the ground, already bracing herself, the way you brace for something you have felt many times before and know is coming again. "She sounds like the only one up there who ever showed mercy when she did not have to," I said. Korun's mandibles clicked together, a sound I had learned meant surprise. "That is one way to see it," he said carefully. "Few among us see it that way." I walked down the line, past Vekun Thasar's sharp, waiting eyes, past 6 other daughters of great houses, who watched me with cold calculation, until I stood in front of Illyra Vosk. She looked up at me, startled, as though she had never once expected anyone to stop walking in front of her. "I choose Illyra Vosk," I said, loud enough for the whole platform to hear. The silence that followed had a weight to it. I heard sharp breaths drawn in through the vocal slits along Vakan Thasar's neck, an unmistakable sound of insult. I heard Grand Marshal Korun shift his weight, uncertain, checking the translation device on his wrist as though he thought it had failed him. "Terran," Korun said slowly, "you understand that House Vosk brings no fleet, no trade rights, no—" "I understand what I said," I told him. "I choose her." Nobody argued with a champion's choice. It was against every law the Ascension Games were built on, but I could feel the eyes of every noble on that platform burning into the back of my neck as Illyra Vosk stepped forward and stood beside me, her hands trembling slightly at her sides. That should have been the end of the story, a strange, stubborn human making a strange, stubborn choice, and everyone going home to argue about what it meant. It was not the end of the story, it was only the beginning of the part that nearly got us both killed. 3 nights later, I was walking the outer corridor of the guest quarters aboard the Dominion's orbital station, unable to sleep, when I heard something that did not belong there. A soft scrape of metal against metal, coming from the maintenance shaft that ran behind Illyra's chamber. I had spent 3 weeks in that arena, learning to trust small sounds. This one made the hair on my arms stand up. I moved to the access panel without making noise, the way my training had drilled into me long before I ever set foot on this station, and eased it open just far enough to see inside. 2 figures crouched in the narrow shaft, dressed in the dark gray service uniforms worn by station maintenance crews, but their movements were wrong. Maintenance crews do not carry sealed cutting tools shaped to breach a door lock from the inside. Maintenance crews do not check over their shoulders every few seconds like men who know they are somewhere they should not be. I backed away slowly and moved fast down the corridor to Illyra's door, pressing the entry chime twice, our signal, before letting myself in. She was awake, sitting by the small viewport that looked out over the curve of her homeworld, and she rose the moment she saw my face. "Something is wrong," she said. It was not a question. "There are people in the maintenance shaft behind your wall," I said. "They are not station crew." Her face changed, fear moving through it, and then something colder settling behind it, a kind of resignation that told me this was not the first time she had feared for her safety. "Vakan Thasar warned her house allies that our alliance would not stand," she said quietly. "I did not think they would act so soon. There was no time to send for guards through proper channels. Dominion protocol required 3 levels of clearance before an alarm could be raised in the noble quarters, and by the time that process finished, whatever was behind that wall would already be finished with us." "We move now," I said. "Is there another way out of this section?" She nodded toward a narrow service lift at the far end of her chamber, one meant for staff rather than nobles, hidden behind a hanging tapestry that showed the crest of her house. "It leads to the lower transit ring. From there, the docking bays." We had barely reached the lift when the wall behind her bed gave way with a sharp crack of tearing metal, and the 2 figures from the shaft dropped into the room. I did not wait to see what tools they carried. I pulled Illyra through the lift doors and slammed my palm against the control panel, and the doors sealed shut just as something heavy struck them from the other side. The lift dropped fast, faster than any lift had a right to move, and I understood a moment later why. Someone had overridden the safety limiters. This was not a random attack. Someone with real access to the station's systems wanted us gone, and they wanted it to look like an accident. "They control the lift systems," I said, gripping the rail as the car shook around us. "We need to get off this thing before it decides where we land." Illyra pressed her palm against a small panel near the door, one I would not have noticed without her guidance, and a maintenance hatch slid open in the side wall, revealing a narrow crawlway running parallel to the shaft. "This way," she said. "It was built for repair crews. Few remember it exists." We climbed through together, the lift car rattling past us and continuing its uncontrolled fall toward the lower decks. And for a moment, I let myself believe we had escaped whatever trap had been set. Then the crawlway lights flickered and died, plunging us into total darkness, and somewhere behind us, I heard the unmistakable sound of a hatch being forced open. They had followed us. "Keep moving," I whispered, guiding Alira forward with one hand on her shoulder, using the faint glow of emergency strips along the floor to find our way. "Do not stop, no matter what you hear." The crawlway opened into a wider maintenance junction, lit by a single working lamp, and it was there that the first of our pursuers caught up to us, dropping down from an overhead vent with the kind of trained precision that told me he was no ordinary saboteur. I put myself between him and Alira without thinking, the way 3 weeks of arena combat had rewired something deep in my instincts. And when he came at me, I used the only advantage I had left, the narrow space itself, turning his greater strength into a liability in a corridor too tight for him to swing freely. I did not need to defeat him. I only needed to slow him down long enough for us to keep moving, and a hard strike to the joint at his elbow, the same trick that had won me the arena days before, sent his weapon skidding away across the floor, and bought us the seconds we needed to run. We reached the docking bay level with our lungs burning and our nerves stretched thin, only to find the main corridor sealed by a security gate that should not have been active this late in the station's night cycle. "They locked us out," Alira said, her voice tight with something that was not quite panic, but was close to it. "Then we find another door," I said, though I could hear how thin my own confidence sounded even to myself. It was Alira who found it, a small crew access panel half hidden behind a bank of cargo containers, the kind of overlooked entry point that only someone who had spent years quietly studying every inch of a station she was never fully welcomed into would think to look for. She worked the manual release with steady hands, steadier than mine, and the panel swung open onto the docking bay floor itself. My shuttle sat there under low emergency lighting, exactly where I had left it, and for one relieved breath, I thought we had made it clear. Then a voice called out across the bay, sharp and commanding, and I turned to see Vekanthasar herself standing near the shuttle's boarding ramp, flanked by 2 of her house guards. "You should not have interfered," she said, her eyes fixed not on me, but on Alira. "This alliance threatens everything my house has built. I will not allow a discarded daughter to undo generations of standing because a Terran soldier felt sorry for her." "Nobody felt sorry for anyone," I said, stepping slightly forward, keeping myself between her and Alira without making it look like a challenge. "I chose the one person on that platform who showed real courage. You sent people to kill her for it. That tells me everything I need to know about which of you actually deserves a fleet." Vakan's guards shifted, hands moving toward weapons at their sides, and for a moment, the whole bay seemed to hold its breath. It was Alira who spoke next, stepping out from behind me, her voice steadier than I expected, carrying none of the fear she had shown minutes before. "You call me a coward for refusing to strike down an opponent who never chose to be in that arena," she said to her sister. "But look at what you have chosen to do instead. You sent hidden blades against an unarmed noble in the dark, because you were afraid of what an honest choice might cost you. Tell me again which of us lacks courage." Something shifted in Vekan's expression, a flicker of doubt breaking through the certainty she had walked in with. Before she could answer, the bay's overhead speakers crackled to life, and Grand Marshal Corrin's voice rang out across the docking level, sharp with authority. "Security override in effect. All personnel in Bay 7 will stand down immediately. This exchange is being recorded." I learned later that a maintenance officer, alarmed by the failed lift and the forced access hatch, had quietly alerted station security the moment the first alarms triggered, and that Corrin himself had been watching the bay's cameras from the command deck for the last several minutes, waiting to see how the confrontation would resolve before revealing his hand. Vakan's guards lowered their weapons at once. She herself stood rigid for a long moment, studying her sister with an expression I could not fully read, before turning without another word and walking from the bay, her house guards following close behind. Grand Marshal Corrin arrived in person soon after, moving with the careful, measured pace of someone who had just watched a crisis resolve itself without needing to draw a weapon of his own. He studied the forced hatch, the damaged lift controls, the tools left behind by the fleeing intruders, and his expression grew grave. "This will be investigated fully," he said. "House Thasser's actions tonight violate the sacred law of the Ascension Games. There will be consequences." "I do not want revenge," Alira said quietly. "I only want the alliance to stand, on its own honest merit, without needing to be defended by force every time someone doubts it. Corin studied her for a long moment, something like respect settling into his sharp features. Perhaps, he said slowly, that is precisely why the Terran chose as he did. In the days that followed, word of what happened in Bay 7 spread through the Dominion faster than any official announcement could have managed. Other houses, ones that had quietly agreed with Vakon Thasar's contempt for House Vosk, began to reconsider their position, not out of sympathy, but out of simple calculation. A house willing to send hidden blades against an unarmed rival in the dark was not a house anyone wanted standing too close to their own interests. Illyra's steady courage in that docking bay, witnessed and recorded for the whole station to see, did more for her house's standing than any fleet ever could have. Command back on Earth was thrilled to learn, weeks later, that House Vosk held quiet but significant rights to mineral deposits along an uncontested stretch of asteroid belt that no other house had bothered to properly survey, too busy competing over territory that already carried prestige to notice territory that simply carried value. It turned out that contempt made people careless, and carelessness left resources sitting unclaimed for whoever was patient enough to look. But none of that was why I stood beside Illyra Vosk on the observation deck the night before my shuttle was due to carry us both back toward the Alliance's newly signed terms, watching the slow turn of her homeworld below. "You did not know any of that would happen," she said. "The attack, the mineral rights, none of it." "No," I admitted. "I only knew what I saw on that platform. Someone who had already been told her whole life that mercy was the same thing as weakness, standing there anyway, refusing to disappear." She was quiet for a while, the light of her world washing pale and blue across her face. "Where I come from," she said finally, "strength is measured by what you are willing to destroy. I have spent 6 years being told I have none, because I once chose not to destroy something I did not have to." "Where I come from," I said, "we have a different way of measuring it. Strength is what you are willing to protect, even when nobody is asking you to, even when it costs you everything the world tells you that you are supposed to want instead." She looked at me then, something steady and unafraid, settling into her expression for the first time since I had met her on that dais of 9 daughters, only one of whom had ever truly earned the title of champion's choice. "Then perhaps," she said, "you did not choose the least respected daughter of the 9 houses after all." "No," I agreed, watching her world turn slow and silent below us. "I think I chose the only one who was ever actually worth choosing."